Hi, I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm feeling really enthusiastic about talking about my topic because it's something that I'm extremely passionate about, and that is deaf gain. And deaf gain aims to challenge and redefine what it is that we know about deafness, about human diversity, and about being different, I guess, in our world. This idea of deaf gain was first suggested by a guy named Williamson. Williamson is a performance artist who began to lose his hearing at a young age. And Aaron's parents did what any typical person would do whenever the body undergoes rapid change, and they sought medical help. After years of multiple visits to doctors and to audiologists, Aaron came to a realization, and he asked this question: why had all the doctors told me that I was losing my hearing, and none of them had told me that I was gaining my deafness? I just want you to think about that for a couple of seconds. So this concept of being deaf incorporates the vastly differing degrees of deafness that range from mild hearing loss to profound deafness. And today, I really want to focus on those who are prelingually deaf. And this means that they have lost their hearing or have become deaf before the acquisition of a language. So that's usually before the age of 5. For these people, British Sign Language is their first language and language of choice. And contrary to common belief, British Sign Language is not just a gestural code that represents the surrounding spoken language, but it's a language in its own right. So sign language, different countries have different sign languages, but within that, different regions also have regional signs which they use, so it's not a universal thing. Sign language is an unwritten language. It's visual, and it has its own grammar. Deaf British Sign Language users have a common experience of life, and this manifests itself in deaf culture. Deaf culture incorporates art, history, value, beliefs, but it's also an attitude. Deaf people are extremely proud to be deaf and extremely proud of their culture. However, deafness can also be seen as a severe loss to the majority hearing people surrounding deaf people. But I want to challenge this today. I want you to take into consideration a deaf child who is born into a deaf family. They are brought up surrounded by sign language, and therefore they naturally acquire this language, and that's how they fully express themselves without any barriers. Just think about that for a moment. Do you think this deaf child experiences any sense of loss within that situation? You see, hearing people have controlled the construction of knowledge about deafness and what it is to be deaf. And unfortunately, because of this, deaf people have been given some sort of secondary status where they are seen as different and therefore less valuable. The social position of deaf people within British society has been reflected by the medical model of deafness. Medical organizations have sought to restore deaf people to the status of hearing and speaking members of society through cure and compensation. Not only does this privilege one way of being over another, but it actively seeks to impose a preference, being hearing, and oppresses another, being deaf. So I just want to think about you in your lives, I guess, and if you think that at any point you've come across a deaf person and had these kind of, they're known as audist attitudes, so autism, which is the oppression of deaf people. Have you been in a situation where you've misunderstood that person, or that person's been misrepresented to you? This is where my research comes into place, my PhD, which I'm studying here at Queen Margaret University. I really want to explore the experiences of deaf people within the NHS, within hospitals, and what that interaction between nurses and deaf people is like. How do they experience it? How do they feel in it? What does it mean for their identity whenever they're in that situation? You'll be happy to know I'm not going to go into lots of detail about my research. If you want to know anything else afterwards, you can ask me though. But I would just like to point out a couple of things that I've learned from a very limited time of being in deaf spaces and deaf contexts. The first thing is that deaf people, whenever they think of being deaf, they don't feel a sense of loss, but it's rather just a distinct way of being in the world. The second thing is that although I want to capture and see those experiences of what it is to be deaf within a healthcare setting, I can never fully cross the border into that world. I will never know what it is to be a deaf child. I will never know what it is to experience the world in a highly visual way. However, I can explore the spaces in between my hearing world and an individual's deaf world. And that's really what I want to pass on to you. Because it's in the cultural moments where I experience that space in between, where I can open up and my ideas and my knowledge about what it is to be deaf can be challenged and regenerated. Lastly, I just want to tell you a story. This is a story about Martha's Vineyard. This is a true story about an island off the coast of Massachusetts. Early settlers on Martha's Vineyard, a lot of them carried a gene which caused deafness. Deafness became so prevalent on the island that the inhabitants developed their own unique sign language. This sign language was not only used by deaf members of the island, but also the hearing. Just think about that for a moment. Everyone was able to communicate with one another without any barriers being put in place. This meant that deaf people were incorporated into every part of the island like community life. They owned farms, they ran businesses, and they sat in local councils and governments. Not only that, but hearing people, saw the benefits of knowing a sign language as well. So farmers could communicate with each other across fields. Women could gossip and chit-chat through shop windows without having to interrupt their daily life. Martha's Vineyard meant that no one was oppressed, no one was discriminated against within that society. And I guess my message for you today is that Martha's Vineyard beautifully illustrates the kind of world that I dream of. And earlier it was mentioned that for something to become a reality, we need to dream of it first. So I want to challenge you to dream of that kind of world also. A world where no one is oppressed and no one is pushed to the margins. Thank you.